We're going to transition into another panel discussion. It is a great pleasure to introduce you to a few people who really are near and dear to my heart. Joni Fetters is our president. She's going to moderate a panel. Now, my notes said that this is the first time that Clay and Tom had talked since the sale, but I don't think that's accurate. No, right. Talk together, actually, I believe is what they meant, right? Okay, on stage in front of a group like this? Yeah, no. No, this is the first time that Tom and Clay have spent time together in front of a group like this, really talking about their story. Again, we're going to have an opportunity for some Q&A, but without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Joni, who will make an introduction to Tom and Clay. Thank you.
How do you want to work it? Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. So I know it's a little warm in here. We keep trying to keep the door open, shut the door, but we're cooling it down as fast as we can. So I'm really excited about this opportunity because I had the opportunity to work for these two as an employee at the Iams company. And as an employee, what you saw was alignment. You saw dedication, hard work, but two leaders that really had figured out a way to work together using both of their strengths. They were different styles, but yet they worked so synergistically. And I think as an employee, what you experienced was confidence and trust that we were going in a right direction. There was a lot of level 3, we're going this way. There was a lot of level 5 in collaboration and using the team strengths. Sometimes there was level 2. I was the experience of level 2, which is a little bit of the let's go win kind of attitude. But it was just an incredible experience, and I saw a partnership unfold while I was there that was just amazing. And so I think that's what we're really here today, is to understand what that partnership looked like. We got a chance to get together a couple weeks ago to kind of just start to warm up a little bit, and I sent them some questions and some thoughts or whatever, and I've already heard this morning that they've already decided they're not going to even listen to what I asked them. So I'm thinking this could be fun. I'll just kind of sit over here and get a chance. But why don't we start with just a little context. So Clay was the 7th employee at the Iams company when it was $500,000 in sales. 20 years later, because of an incredible partnership he had with Paul Iams, Clay was now the owner of Iams, and Paul had successfully retired from the business. So there's another story some other day around that partnership, because it continued on when Clay actually hired Tom. Even though Paul was no longer in the business, Clay still went and had Tom meet Paul, which will be another fun thing to see how Paul received you. But then they also, when they were going to sell the company, they flew out to see Paul. So that partnership continued throughout. So that was the first one. But at 20 years later, there are 172 million in sales, 400 employees. Clay's the sole owner. He's 49 years old, and this partnership begins. So Clay, what was the context of why you started to look for a president?
Well, I put together an outside board in 1986, and by 1989 they were ready to fire me. And they said, you need to be fired because you're not taking advantage of a lot of opportunities in the marketplace. And the reason I wasn't is because I was fat, dumb, and happy. I was making a lot of money, nobody knew it, putting a couple, $3 million a year away. And it took me a while to digest that one. And so that board kept pecking away at me. So in 1990, I decided to go do what they told me that I should do. And Mary agreed with them, by the way. And Mary's out here somewhere. Mary? Hi, Mary. There she is.
Welcome, Mary.
So I started listening. And the last board meeting in 1989, I got real specific with the board about who this person is, what are they going to be doing, what am I going to be doing, how are we going to work together, all those kind of things. And they were able to satisfy me enough that I was willing to talk to a headhunter. And of course, the first thing out of the headhunter's mouth is that'll be $300,000, you know. It'll take me 3 months to find the person. And so I hired him the first thing I did is I called Ed Wingate, who was on my board, who was the HR person at the Dayton Hudson Target companies. And I said, Ed, LeMaile wants $300,000 to do this search. And Wingate says, I'll call you back. And he called me back and he said, you know, I think it's worth it. I think you ought to consider using LeMaile because I know he's going to be able to get the job done. I know he's going to be able to source the right person for you. And the risk that you're taking by doing this, $300,000 is small. So I paid him $200,000 when I signed, $100,000 when he presented the candidates, and the last $100,000 when the first candidate started. We went down with three. We ended up with three. We whittled it down from a large population to three. Tom being one of the three, and then we went through the whole process, meeting the family, us meeting Barb, and all of that courting that went on, and April 1st, 1990, first day of our strategic planning, Tom MacLeod starts and is introduced to the whole planning team as your next boss. Okay.
On April Fool's Day.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, that's a long story, but the bottom line is my board felt strongly, my team felt strongly about it, my family felt strongly about it, and we ended up getting obviously a great guy who had the right values and was willing to take this business and really move it ahead, not just be a custodian, you just keep trucking along, but move it ahead.
So before we jump into the partnership and Tom's perspective, what was the emotional journey that you were going through when your board first started telling you you weren't doing everything you needed to be doing?
Yeah, I think after I got over the ego shock of I can do anything, I can be a professional manager, I can do this, I can do that. When I really get down to it, and the realization was I'm pretty good at strategy, I'm a pretty decent communicator, but I can't, operating wise, I mean, I'm a disaster. And I had all kinds of things going on. Tom came in, I'll let him tell you, but he came in, we had a lot of little brush fires going, like horse food, and what was a couple other?
Few pet stores. We had a few.
Yeah, we had a few pet stores that we owned. That
jewelry store.
the marketplace was mad at us all the time. And
a couple of restaurants.
couple of restaurants, that's right. We had a couple of restaurants.
It's all right.
See what I mean?
Clay is being extremely modest. He could have, it might have taken a little longer, but this is an exceptional man. Intellectually, spiritually, and also he, because I came from kind of a series of blue blood Fortune 100 companies, so I met some smart people, but I never met anybody who could see how the puzzle was going to play in the future. May have been a more efficient way to get to the answer. Maybe I helped a little bit with that. But this guy is in a class by himself in seeing that. And I don't know how he does it. I can't do it. I could do some other things, but he could see the puzzle. And that sure helped me a lot. So the other thing, too, was very interesting, the discussion before, even though she hasn't asked me yet, is
Here we go, Tom.
I was also in a Fortune 100 company. I was called CEO of Sara Lee, but I was CEO of a unit of Sara Lee Corporation, the original food company, cheesecakes and pound cakes. But it became very clear to me how inefficient good public companies are because of their ownership. You know, you get get a question at the quarter from a 27-year-old Harvard MBA as to why his grandmother can't find banana cake in Seattle. You know, shouldn't be working on that. So there were a lot of inefficiencies. There were a lot of inefficiencies in good public companies. Public companies are very good for America, but they have an ownership structure which has built-in inefficiency. And the thought of going into a private enterprise, and a good one, where you could collapse that inefficiency and spend all that inefficient time building the business was a real appeal to me.
And from
And
my
I know you didn't
standpoint,
ask that.
my standpoint is I had confidence, all the confidence that Tom could do the job because of what he had done before. No, he didn't say he was president of Wilson Sporting Goods International Business when he was 29. He didn't tell you that he was president of PepsiCo Canada when he was 32. So he came to us and he was 41, and he had had 3. This had been his 4th CEO job. And so he wasn't practicing on us. He was the real deal. And that was very apparent. I mean, right from the first week that we sat down in strategic planning, those strategic planning meetings, and he really started to participate right away. Now, he pissed me off a couple times, but you know, we ruffled the feathers and we got those things pretty well taken aback. And he was always in deference to me, and being the owner of the company, he treated me with respect. But that first strategic planning session was, well, I wish I'd videotaped that thing.
Well, you know, the thing is, when we were courting, when we got toward the end of the courtship, Clay, you talk about opening the books, he showed me the books, he gave me the strategic plan. And there were great plans in there. They just hadn't been done. So my question was, you know, I'm a dog owner. You know, I'd become, in the courtship process, I'd become a user. I said, why aren't we doing these? And he goes, well, that's your job. You know? But, you know, the company was professionally managed, but it just needed some priority setting, and, you know, these will be our A priorities, and we'll get to these other ones a little bit later. And also, Clay had 4 dreams, one of which is this place, which is great. The other thing you may not know, not only have Clay and I not done this together, but I've never participated in a aileron session. So this is my maiden voyage twice. But he had 4 big dreams. And that was mixed into some of the reasons we weren't getting all these things done that were in the plan, because some were outside the business. So we agreed me and our team at the pet food company would be responsible for dream number 2, which was to make the paw print recognized as a symbol of excellence around the world in dog and cat nutrition. And we could do that. The other ones, you're going to need to get some help to do the other ones. We'll help if we can, but let us focus on number 2. And he let us. He let us do that.
And the thing about it is, it was easier as time went on, because it was very apparent to me that Tom was the right guy, and I wanted it to work, and he wanted it to work. So the fact that we both wanted it to work, it was best for the business. Family was in support. Boom, let's go.
Now, I only sit on private boards. I won't sit on public boards. So the thing that made this work was he wanted it to work. So all of you out there who may be thinking about, is it time I don't have an inside resource? Is it time for me to look outside? The first conversation you have to have is with yourself. Because if you want to do it because you read it in the Harvard Business Review, or a consultant told you this, or Aileron told you this, if that's why you want to do it, probably won't work. If you want it to work, then the only thing you have to do then is find the right person. If you're not sure, that's high risk. And I've seen that on some of these boards I'm on, where there's a lot of talk about, oh yeah, we're going to go in, but really it wasn't all the way there. So the reason this worked is because he wanted it to work. That's the reason it worked.
Yeah, and I think too, well, I'm not sure. I lost my train of thought there. That happens.
So far, you guys are following exactly what I wrote up for you, so you're doing
You
really
asked a lot of questions, yeah. Right.
The other thing that helped is sitting in the back of the room, which is Mary. Because it wasn't a regular discipline, like every week or every quarter, but there were times when I also chatted with Mary, particularly in the earlier parts of the relationship or the association with the company. And she was a big help too in providing perspective on this or that or the other thing, and also understanding how the business was doing, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of took off there for a while.
Yeah, we sure did. Yeah.
So,
Well, actually, when Tom came on board, I think we were doing about 150, 180 million, something like
somewhere.
that. And when we sold the company to P&G, we were working on $1 billion revenue plan.
Yeah.
So not too bad, about 17, 18% compounded over 10 years, and 16% over 30 years. I think that's the right number.
Yeah.
But and we were growing in a market that was maybe GNP plus 1 or 2, so it was growing at 4 or 5. We were growing at 10 or 15% revenue, and it was because we really were developing operation excellence. I mean, our manufacturing plants were very efficient. Our whole organization was committed and efficient, and we never talked about money. We talked about our dream. We talked about the vision. We talked about the people, customer, culture, products, and people. Those are the things that we kept talking about.
Yeah, the one of the key words in dream number 2 was become known worldwide. And one of the things that Clay wanted in his new hire was international experience, which I had a lot of. But worldwide is a very expensive word. And I wanted to make sure in the courtship process that Clay, because I take those, as he knows, Joni, I take things like vision, mission, strategy, I take those words very seriously. You know, I'm a Catholic, I memorize the catechism. So I take those words very seriously, and worldwide is a huge word, and it's a very expensive word, and that was a significant part of how we accelerated our growth. We did very well in the United States too, but adding on a big chunk of brand new business, he was game. He was game for it. So
Well, I was dabbling around in the international before Tom came, and I had made at least 2 or 3 of the biggest mistakes that you make, and I made them. And I was going to keep international, let Tom focus on the domestic business. And then as we got to talking, and I realized, man, you know, this guy's got an international experience, and I've screwed this thing up. let's get it back on track. So it wasn't, what, 6 weeks after?
Yeah.
One day I had a whole bunch of stuff, and I brought it down to his office. I laid it on the desk, and I said, okay, International's yours, Bob. He looked at me like, okay.
Yeah. What Clay didn't know is I'd screwed up International too, but I did it on somebody else's money.
Yeah.
So, so as I was learning the ropes that he was learning, I was doing it with other people's money. And so by the time I got to Iams, I kind of knew what to do. So
We had about, I think we were doing close to 200 million internationally. 300 million.
When we sold it was 300.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and about 2/3 of that was Europe.
Yeah.
And we started basically from scratch in Japan. And that was, I think, 60, 70 million when we sold it.
That was a good business, yeah.
So, anyway. But anyway, next question.
Well, you both hinted at it a little bit, but I think there's a question a lot of times when people are bringing someone else in, what will I do and what will you do? Like how, from both your perspectives, how would you define your role where you guys kind of landed? And how did you get there?
Yeah. Trying to think. Why don't you go first?
Okay.
I get my thoughts.
Well, we had not operated together. I think in the courtship, we found out everything we could find out without getting married. So we got married, and then we figured that was going to take some time. My assessment of the plans and the markets and the people was we can get going right away if we just kind of take this plan book and focus it down and get clear about what we're going to do. We can take off right away. And he let us do that. So it kind of over time, it wasn't black and white, but it was long-term strategic thinking and, you know, putting some bumper guards on us and then go get them. And my job was go get them. But part of my job of go get them was to kind of clarify what we're going to go get.
And I think the key for me was that I had to know, and if I had it to do over again, I would have been more clear about what my role was going to be going forward. Yeah. We had to test that out. I mean, it was his sandbox and my sandbox. And when I got in his sandbox, I had to behave differently. When he got in my sandbox, which is very seldom, but when he got in my sandbox, I had to do the same thing. But the role of the owner who's making this transition is be sure that you have a very clear definition of what is my job going forward. And I think what ended up is my job was more strategic, helping Tom work with people and the strategy. I think meeting with our customers, our suppliers were an important and integral part of our business, our operational business, and I was involved with them and did some exciting programs with them as well. Yeah. But staying out of their way, okay, remember the chain of command, which is always difficult for me, is, you know, come in, sit down with some employee and leave, and they're off in another direction. I remember Tom used to say, he taught the organization about me thinking out loud. Remember? Yeah,
we reached a deal, and this is very relevant. I call them hallway decisions. This is a great leader, great man. I'm a devout follower also, but you know, there does have to be a transition. And so we had this agreement that we can't lock Clay in his office. That makes no sense. He's a great resource. But we can't be making hallway decisions, which is the style of an entrepreneur. See a snake, kill a snake, you know, that, or whatever Harvard's writing about these days. So, but we couldn't have that because the people get selective. So the snakes they want killed, they go to Clay, and the snakes they want managed, they come to me. Well, that won't work. So we agreed, wander the company, you know, see what you want to see, feel what you want to feel, but let's make the decisions, the actions in our process. It's not that hard. It's not that, I'm not some guy that requires a 20-page memo to make a decision. I like to kill snakes too, but we gotta have a process. So that freed up, and this didn't happen on day one, you know, this evolved, but that freed up the owner to wander his own company, for God's sake. I mean, you gotta have that. He also is very perceptive. I mean, he sees things in factories, with people, with other things. Over my head, I didn't see some of this stuff. So when he would come to me and say, hey, you know, out in Aurora, you better look at the extruder on the second line. It's about to go. So, okay. But he didn't, what he wouldn't do is say to the plant manager, get a new extruder, you know. So I'm just saying, there is a simple rule. I call them hallway decisions. If you do bring somebody in, the worst thing for your organization is to have a two-headed monster. Yes. Then that ain't gonna work. Even if the guy brought in is the right guy and wants to do the right thing, it won't work. On the other hand, you can't exclude, you know, you can't exclude the owner. My God, it's his company. And it didn't, Iams in particular, didn't get to where it is without great leadership before I ever showed up at the front door. So I respected that. Anyway.
And would you say it took us about 18 months to 2 years to really get to the point where we were clicking? Yeah. I mean, before that, you know, we're still moving ahead. There was still pretty good focus. But I mean, Tom was a focus guy. In fact, that pond out there is for you. Focus.
Yeah. Oh, for my fly rod?
And we had a lot of fun. And he and I, you know, we liked the same things. We liked sports, and we had, you know, you had 4 kids, I had 5, both Catholics, and so it didn't take long for us to connect up, you know. Not social. I mean, we weren't social, but we just liked each other, liked to have lunch or coffee, and he kept me updated. If there was any problems, he was always able to seem to nip him in the bud. And
well, that was another thing too, because it was Clay's and Mary's money. I figured if there was a problem, it was my responsibility to solve, even if it was a soft tissue problem, not a financial problem. That if Clay got upset about something, it wasn't his duty to come and make me feel better. It was my duty to figure out what's bothering, what can I do to fix it, is it a real problem or is it something small? So that was right from the get-go. That's why I think the period of time it took for us to become really functional was 18 months or whatever it was, because you just didn't let it, you can't let little things fester.
I remember one time he was in Europe and he was on his airplane coming back, and I was on my high horse. There was something that I was really, really upset about. And it was in the wintertime, right? And we were having an ice storm. Tom gets off the plane, comes out to the house to sit down and to talk to me so we could resolve this issue. And then we were doing a little chit-chat, and he says, Clay, he said, I don't want to be rude. Mary was there, too. I don't want to be rude, but I'm going to have to go home because my youngest daughter's at home catching the water from frozen pipes that are in my house. Now, here's a guy that just got off an airplane, came out there to fix the IAMS problem rather than to help, you know, to take care of this water problem. I mean, it was under control. I mean, it wasn't. But so anyway, I felt really bad about it, you know, and I said, well, look, it was on a weekend.
Yeah.
And I said, let me get my plumber to help you. So we sent a plumber over to his house so that he could fix the pipes, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You get the picture.
Which was a good thing, because wasn't going to be a plumber available in Dayton that night. It was like 5 degrees below zero.
Yeah, it was.
Anyway, but I think the point is, I felt it was my job to address that. It was it was something we had never done before, and it required an accrual on our books. It was, you know, coupons, 30 cents off a Domino's pizza. Well, you got to accrue for those. When you send them out, you got to accrue for what might be the redemption rate, because you don't know what the redemption. Well, we'd never done that at Iams. I'd done it all my former life, but he'd never seen it. Now, our financial guys, God bless them, could have handled that problem for me, but they didn't.
They heard about it.
But they didn't. So, but it was my job to handle that, and the other things too. And that's just the way I'm built.
Well, and that makes, think about what kind of an impact that had, for me at least, that this guy, you know, anybody ever think that this guy's not committed, you know, let me tell you the story. And that's the way he was the entire time. I mean, it was not halfway. I mean, he was all the way. He was all in. And the team that he put together was all in. It was a great team, phenomenal team. Had a great mix between the old Iams people and the new people, and it was a great culture. And it's been 19 years, Tom.
Wow, went fast.
Yeah.
Went fast.
Yeah, I experienced the focus of Tom and the let's go. I think I got a call the night before that says, hey, we need to solve a problem out in Aurora. I want you to go with me. So we get on a plane in the morning and we're in Aurora, and he goes, and by the way, we're going to stop over in Arizona to stop and see PetSmart. We got a call at 1. And then on the way home, it was like, and we need to make one more stop over in Hendersonville. We were like, okay, let's just run around. But that was our days with Tom. He was very focused, committed. It was never about
The other thing
travel.
too is he had tremendous stamina. Like, we get on an airplane heading for Europe, and this guy puts on the shades when the plane's coming down the runway, and he sleeps the whole time, and gets up, has a cup of coffee, goes into the bathroom, gets all freshened up, because he's having a meeting over there at 8 o'clock the following morning. I'm not going to that meeting, I guarantee you that. I didn't sleep half the night, you know, restless, you know, and MacLeod wakes up, yeah, everything's great. And that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And
Can we go
I had
back-
to take an extra day.
Can we go back to the two-headed monster a little bit? So, Clay, you were 7th employee. So a lot of the people that you had worked with were people that you knew, and so they trusted you 100%. Then you bring in Tom. So I know that it would be easier for many of them to go to you and to create that. I mean, it was a very environment, and I think a lot of our business owners face that today as they're looking at transferring G1 to G2 or the next generation, because you've got commitment and loyalty to the first generation, and then they bring in the second generation. So can you guys shed a little bit more light on how you manage that? Because I know there was some of that dynamic going on.
Sure. I mean, it came down to, look, John Polson ran all of our manufacturing area. He was probably the last one that we reeled in to sign up to no hallway decisions. But he was comfortable. Clay, you know, I was not long and strong in extrusion technology. I came from bakery technology and some, you know, canning and bottling technology, and before that, cut and sew, you know. So I wasn't long and strong on our manufacturing technology. So John was more comfortable going to Clay on the ones he knew Clay wanted to approve. And then he'd come to me on the ones where Clay wanted him to do something and John didn't want to do it. So I'll let Tom handle Clay on the stuff I don't want to do, and I'll deal with Clay myself on the stuff I want to do. So I let that go on for a couple months, and then I trapped him. And John's a good guy. John is a good guy. So we had a little meeting, just the three of us. And we had our philosophical discussion about, because it wasn't Clay's responsibility, this was John. So we just had a little meeting about hallway decisions. So I made it clear to John, I want you to be able to talk to Clay all you want about any problem in the company. But when it comes to deciding something, we are going to respect our process. You good with that? And we hadn't done that as a threesome. So he signed up. And he lived up to his word. So you just have to, you don't have to be, you don't have to fire somebody or get all hot and bothered. You just have to make the rules clear. And you got to be flexible at the beginning. If you're a new leader coming in, you can't be from the Fidel Castro School of Management. You have got to have some patience and flexibility. You also have to have your ego in check. You just have to be, but if you do that over time and you prove you know what you're doing, it just becomes natural. So it becomes easy for Clay. He can wander his own company without worrying about setting off 6 or 7 different projects, and people can talk to Clay without worrying that, oh, I'm going to be mad because they talked to Clay. No, I want you to talk to Clay. He's got good ideas. Some bad ideas, but some good ideas too. So talk to him. He's a good guy. So you do have to be, you have to have that mentality, I think. Does that make sense?
That's perfect, thank you. So we have about 15, 20 minutes, and I want to take an opportunity to see if there's some questions out there. So pass this around. Do we have another microphone or?
Microphone.
Keith?
Thank you. It's kind of timely. I like the analogy of the hallway decisions, and I'm wondering where you draw the line on letting those people make those decisions to keep productivity moving forward and having a decision that has to come back to the three of you.
Oh, we had a hierarchy, whether it was financial or responsibility. We didn't put every decision, but what I wanted to make sure, and they didn't necessarily bother Clay with every decision before I got there, but it was big stuff, big stuff that whether it be a person, an investment, a new product, a packaging look, something that had, so we tended to make big decisions through that sieve. The little everyday stuff, Clay had already built a culture of, before I got there, of, it's your job, you decide, but that does have its limits. We had some limits financially and then strategically also. But, that's different in every company. I think if you just think about it, you'll know in your company how that works.
But that was a pretty disciplined process that Tom put in place. And I think when I saw it happening is I saw these people becoming really prefer Tom, to work for Tom, because Tom was very clear about what he wanted, what he expected, and very consistent. And that's a real important thing. And it's especially, somebody like me who's, constantly throwing stuff on the wall. But
Do you remember what you said to me when I asked about doing the magazines?
I'm getting old, Joni. I don't remember. What did I say?
I'm not sure I really like the idea, but if you really feel this passion about it, you can do it, but I reserve the right to pretty much scream at you at the end of the day and tell you I told you so.
Okay.
But we were very empowered. That's my point. It was a very empowering piece where I took them the new biscuit boxes, and in American Brands where I was at, you had to get everything approved through 20 layers. And I take them to Tom, and he's like, "Do you like them?" And I'm like, "Yep." And he goes, "Well, then why are you in here asking me?" You know, it was very much a very empowering place from that perspective. Thanks, Keith.
I don't know if you can hear me, Valerie Webster. Maybe if you could expound a little bit more, I love the hallway decision conversation and understanding maybe the fundamentals or some principles around your decision-making process. It would be really helpful to get some details about what's involved with that.
Well, you know, I think it's different for every company. The hallway decisions I'm talking about are ones that were big and impactful. You don't want to make those casually in any company, but I don't know what's big and impactful in your company. But you do want a lot of decisions made that you never hear about. You want your people empowered, you want them qualified to decide, you want them to know where the limit is, where they ought to say, well, maybe I ought to at least get another layer of approval on this, or I can do it myself. So I think that's different in every company. But once you lay out the rules, whatever those definitions are, you can then, if they aren't right, you can modify them from that point forward. But you shouldn't just be willy-nilly. And in our case, where Clay had been this great leader, great inspirational leader, and the people that worked for him loved him, you know, we kind of had to have some rules if there was a new guy. The other thing that was very interesting is I inherited a great team. When Clay said we had a nice mix of new and old people, the new people came in mostly underneath. I reorganized some of the duties of that layer of management reporting to me, but they all made the cut. And every one of them, the day I showed up, thought, well, here's Mr. Ivy League, you know, Fortune 100 guy. He's going to bring all his pals from Sara Lee. I didn't bring one. They were all very well qualified. We had to, you know, clarify the duties, but they all made the cut, except the guy in Europe. The guy in Europe didn't make it, but not because he was not qualified.
He hadn't been with us long either.
But he was also acultural.
Yeah.
He was acultural from an Iams standpoint when it came to behavior. He was outside the box. So I had to do that differently. But everybody, you know, it surprised them. I didn't mean to wander off the page.
And one of the processes, I don't know, but he put in play that, because I was fairly young there experiencing it, was called a basis of interest. So when you had a bigger idea that was going to take some substantial investment, you wrote up literally a page to 3. It wasn't real intense. And he actually would have us meet on a monthly basis as some of the leaders of the company, and we would present those to each other, because if you could stand up in front of your peers and Clay and Tom and kind of convince people that it was a good idea, it helped shape the idea. So that was part of the decision-making process.
Yeah.
Very collaborative, you know. Tom's a strong guy, and I remember some of the bets that were being taken about how long he was going to last. Yeah. And they were mostly in months, by the way. But
Yeah.
and
I knew that, you know.
Yeah, you know it.
I'd been a new guy before, so I knew that.
Quick question about, this place is all about culture, and you guys understand the power of, and both of you have mentioned married as a spouse and your people, and how much you love your people. Can you just speak to the power of this culture? Tom, you coming into it, Clay, you building it from the very beginning. A lot of us always want to know the secret sauce, and we know it's into good ones?
Go ahead.
Well, Iams was pretty far along in the development of its culture when I showed up, and I loved it. You know, I assumed it was true. I assumed what I was hearing and reading was true. It was very evident it turned out to be true. So my job was to foster that and grow it, because cultures do evolve. That was one of my pet peeves, is values don't change. Cultures evolve. As we became an international company, our culture evolved. But it still was built on hard work and respect for others and those kind of things. But it was already there, and I loved it. So I figured, I'm one of the caretakers now. I got to make sure that it continues to be fostered. So I got to give Clay the credit, because I inherited that, and then I tried to make it better. If he'd, you got to hire somebody though that will, if you're going to hire an outsider, somebody's got to respect that, or prior to darkening the front door, tell you what he or she thinks is wrong. So,
You know, the way I thought about culture is I just wanted to create a workplace that I would enjoy working in. I mean, that was sort of my criteria, is that I had had bad experiences working for public companies, and I didn't want to have an environment like that. I didn't want to work in an environment like that. So I tried to create an environment where people would feel empowered, where people would feel good about themselves, that they would care about the quality of the product and the mission, vision, and values of the organization. And fortunately, you know, when Tom came, I did have 3 or 4 that were, you know, standard bearers, if you will, of the culture, and they were important in those early years too, because that's the way we do things around here, you know.
right.
And but it was great, and it was great though to watch the culture, like Tom says, evolve, but still retaining the values, the beliefs that we've held dear for a long time. Some all the way back from Paul Iams.
Yeah. Enrique, you asked a question about how do you cull the herd? How do you cull your company? Well, part of our culture was you got to work hard and be qualified for what you do, and that was known coming in the door. So if you end up unqualified, or you're not working hard and getting results, there's going to be a problem. And if the problem doesn't get resolved, you're not going to be on the team. So there was that part of the culture too. It was very healthy, very good, and everybody knew it. So
We call it pruning the bush.
yeah.
Every year we would take a look at the entire population and say, okay, are the individuals that aren't cutting it. And most of them had, you know, another chance. But if there were 2 years in a row, they were on the list. They knew they had to be gone. And it wasn't that thing that Jack Welch had where he was going to just fire the bottom 10% or whatever. It wasn't like that at all. We had no quotas around it. We just want to make sure we had a fresh organization that was capable of doing the things that we wanted to do and to be able to succeed.
And we had written standards of performance. So there would, you know, there's always, whenever you ask a lawyer, whenever you write anything down, no matter how hard you try, there's still gray area. But we had pretty clear standards of performance written, and they were in 3 buckets. There were financial standards, strategic progress. So we had a strategy. How are we progressing against what we said we were going to do? And then personal development. So he had written standards. So if you're an employee and you go, okay, the company made its numbers, I'm happy for that, but on things I control, my standards of performance and my personal development, I'm getting a C-. That's not good. But they're written down. They're written down. So there's no, you know.
No place to
Yeah.
hide.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about those Iams Restaurants?
Yeah,
They were good. They had good
Iams
food.
Restaurant.
What did they serve?
Hungarian and Eastern European food.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
there was a lady who was a friend of ours that wanted to open a restaurant in Old North Dayton. Mary and I funded it, and she was running a restaurant.
great food.
Great food. She didn't make
Wow.
much money, though.
I know. I know.
Anybody ever invested in a restaurant? Don't. Yes.
Yeah, my roommate, Jeff. Anybody from Cincinnati? My roommate in college for 3 years was Jeff Ruby. So I'm an investor in Carlo and Johnny's. Got my first non-food dividend this year
Really?
after 11 years.
You mean you actually got cash?
Cash.
Whoa.
Took 11 years, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the transition to selling to P&G? It must have changed the relationship and how you communicated from that time of once you kind of decided on that path and then through the sale.
Well, we had a lot of communication about that, and we, of course, it was confined to, you know, a few people. But once the decision was made that the company would not remain in the hands of the family for a long period of time, and the family made that decision, then we started talking and thinking about, you know, what were the next steps and how we would go about approaching either a strategic merger, a sale, or, you know, public or an ESOP. ESOP didn't really work for us, but.
And I felt my most important job, other than, you know, when Clay wanted to talk about it, and he's, you know, he's very subjective on those kind of, it wasn't just numbers. So when he wanted to talk about that, I'm available. But I felt my single most important job in that window, where I now know he was serious about it, was to make sure he could say no, which meant run the company as if nothing is happening, so that if at the end of the process his instincts and his internal computer says, not the right time, we haven't skipped a beat. That was hard. Yeah. That, you know, but I viewed that as clearly I have got to be able to make sure he can say no, if that's his decision. But he said yes for all the right reasons. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question about governance. So, Clay, you spent a lot of time putting a board together. Tom, you came into an existing board. Did that board ever become yours? How did you end up seating board member? How did you work with the board after you became the CEO?
Me?
And Clay, how did you deal with that governance as still the chairman? Just wondering how you two managed the board.
I was not on the board until late 1988. So there's another story behind that. But I felt an obligation to the board. I'd interviewed with them, and I felt an obligation to report the strategic progress we were making, the financial progress we were making, and so it was very much professional relationship. As is always in human nature, there are a couple guys I like better than other guys, but that wasn't my job. That was Clay's job to pick the advisors that he felt were going to help him.
I had one guy that I had to fire because he was treating Tom with disrespect, and it just didn't work. And I knew that he wasn't going to stand for it for very long. And so I asked the guy to leave the board. And then the next one that we brought on was with your concurrence.
Yeah.
So we had, and we still had one guy in there that
Yeah.
Tom would like to take out behind the woodshed, but
Yeah. But there was an international guy from Gillette
yeah, very good.
who really, he helped me think through some of the international organization things really well. But by and large, they were good. They were good. And then this, I don't know, is that the time?
You're good.
I'll hold my story.
Pete,
No.
are you going to tell him about Pete?
No.
Oh, okay.
So Clay came to me, I think, late 87, maybe early 88,
98.
98, only 10 years different,
Well,
98.
that's what happens,
said,
Tom.
It's time, I want you to be CEO. And I said, Clay, I can't do that. I said, it is much easier to run the company if you're the CEO, because that's what people expect. I said, my job duties won't change. I'm very flattered that you want to do that. Beyond belief, I'm flattered. But the company will run better if you're the CEO. And it took him back a little bit when I said that. But then when it became, I think when the family started to decide that maybe time to sell the company, then about a year later, he made me CEO. And I accepted for the right reasons then. And then I joined the board. But the board relationship was very, Mike, just to answer your question, was very professional. And Clay did do me the courtesy when he rotated to have me meet and weigh in, but it was always his choice. And he, by and large, had very good boards.
First of all, Clay, I just want to say that my name is Bo Necco, and my organization spent a fair amount of time here, and thank you. I didn't know that was your fourth dream until today to make it on, but
Third dream.
Third dream.
This is third. Yeah.
Third. We don't know the fourth yet. But it's made a profound difference in professional management, so thank you.
Thank you.
And my question is about acquisitions and private equity, and your thoughts on that, and the decisions you made not to make acquisitions.
You went through that exercise,
Yeah.
private equity and
You know, if you don't need it,
yeah.
I wouldn't go near it. And then as far as acquisitions go, if you're a highly cultural company and you're making an acquisition of a company, it better fit. Now, we made one acquisition, but it was really a factory. It wasn't a company. We bought a factory that was brand new where we could fast track one of our initiatives, but it wasn't a company. We didn't have to integrate a whole company into our culture. So I think the more cultural you are, the harder it is to make a good acquisition.
I don't know who we would have wanted to acquire.
Well, remember?
I know.
So there's a company called Royal Canin in France, you know, a very, very union-friendly country. So they were for sale. So Clay and I get the book and we're looking at, we ought to maybe take a plane and go over there and look at these guys because we got nothing going in France. Well, literally 3 days before we're going to go over there, the employees took the management hostage in this Royal Canin in 2 or 3 of their factories, and we decided, we're not going.
Thank God for the French. Thank God for the French.
It's a great place except for the people.
Yeah. I agree. Any French people here?
Great, well, we'll take one more question, and then it'll be time for lunch, so. You've already asked a question, so I'll go back to the back.
So I think we know dream 2 and 3, but I'd love to know 1 and 4.
Well, 1 was to own my own business, and 4 was to use our technology to enhance the human experience through alternative food products for people who are malnourished. And we're just getting into that. I mean, it's something that I've been fooling around with for a long time, and it's either need to get serious about it at some point. But we've done a lot of work, and we've made some great progress. But primarily, the initiative is supported by the Till Family Foundation. Mary and Tim kind of oversee that. So.
Thank you. On behalf of the entire group here, Mary, Clay, Tom, Tim, Mike, everybody that's here, gosh, what a journey you guys have done together with such an incredible value system, and we thank you for all this work.
This place wouldn't be here today in the condition it's in without Tom's input, because what he did for our company and our family allowed us to do this. So I thank you for that, as well as all the other things that we've done together.
Well, it was a team effort.
Sure was.